morning, as we get to celebrate Palm Sunday together, I want us to lean into for a moment. 500 years before Jesus had, come into the world, as the people of God were in a season of life and a season of the world of chaos and confusion, and things were absolutely crazy. There came a moment where God brought this gentleman named Zechariah to be this guy who brought great encouragement and great vision and great wisdom and great encouragement to the people. And as he's speaking to everyone, he reads this moment that we read now hundreds and thousands of years later on Palm Sunday, the Sunday before Easter. It says this, Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. "Rejoice, O people of Zion. Shout in triumph, O people of Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming to you. He is righteous and victorious, yet he is humble, riding on a donkey's colt." I could only imagine what it would be like to be there on that day, in this moment, as Jesus is riding into the city of Jerusalem. I would love for us to only imagine for a second what it would be like as if we were a child. Imagine being 8, 9, 10, kind of that older elementary age of kind of getting to understand a little bit of the world, but still a lot of it is new. But imagine being at that age. And imagine having growing up your whole life. And many families at that time were struggling, and things were hard and deeply unfair, and things were just tough. And there were many days where dad was ill or dad couldn't work, and so you had very little. And there were many nights perhaps where you and your siblings would kind of sit around the table, and there'd be a single candle lit. And there'd be barely enough bread to feed everyone, and sometimes mom and dad would even ignore their portions so that way you and your siblings could have yours. But yet still in all those moments, you'd hear from mom and dad this hope. This hope that one day things will be a little bit different. This hope that it's not always going to be like this. We don't know when, but we know that God has said that he's going to send a king and he's going to change everything. So could you imagine hearing the stories of your ancestors in the Red Sea and your ancestors of God just blessing them as they spread as a people, and all the miracles and the promises of what God brought about for your humanity, for your people? Could you imagine hearing those stories your whole life, and then all of a sudden one day you start to hear mom and dad and other parents and other kids too at school start talking about this Jesus of Nazareth? This guy who is feeding thousands of people, this guy who's doing miracles and healing people, this guy who's casting out demons. Imagine being this child, hearing these stories, and almost this genuine sense of curiosity. And one day you find out that he's coming to your city. He's on his way to Jerusalem. And imagine as you wake up that morning, instead of heading out and doing your normal business, instead you see that he is coming into your town. He's riding in on a donkey of all things, and he's riding in, and you see these people are gathering and they're shouting in the streets, Hosanna, this term of celebration that our rescuer has come. Imagine being stranded on an island and you're like, yes, the helicopter, the plane is here. Our rescuer is here. People are shouting, Hosanna. Look who's here to rescue us. This is him, right? And they're laying down these palm branches and all these things. And as a child, you're kind of trying to weave through the crowd, right? All these towering adults all around you. And you're trying to stand on your tippy toes and maybe climb on a few carts or crates and trying just to see. And everyone is going crazy in this moment. And then in your childlike imagination, you begin to wonder what he's going to do next. Is this guy, is he going to go up to King Herod's door and knock on it? And is he going to come in and is he going to look at the throne and say, "You're in my seat, dude"? What is this moment going to look like? Is he going to stand before the Roman guards, and is he going to bring some sort of plagues or some sort of miracle against them? And what is he going to do, right? This is the moment, right? We've been talking about Zechariah and the words he talked about, how our king would come, and this is what it would look like, and it's happening. This is it. And then all of a sudden, as he's heading down the street, people are shouting. Instead of making a right-hand turn to head over to King Herod's palace or to another part of the city, he kind of makes a left. And he heads towards the temple. And everyone's like, what is happening now? Is he going to go and kind of like stir people up. What's going to happen next? What's going to go on next? And all of a sudden, everyone's kind of this crowd following behind him. And imagine being a child, as growing up, especially in the city of Jerusalem, a part of your life. Go to the temple, you'd worship there. There was a part of, some of y'all grew up in church, and so you know the Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, just the rhythm of living out our faith. But people in that time had it even more intense. And so you see this man who is a king head over to the temple. And maybe he's going to kind of bring about this message of encouragement. Maybe he's going to build up an army of all of us, right? Maybe this is what's going to happen. But instead he gets off his donkey. He then walks into the temple. He doesn't use the courtyard as a moment to kind of stir up an audience. Instead, actually, to your complete shock, he walks into the temple and he sees all this worship that's happening. And honestly, a lot of these people who are taking advantage of it and who are fake and pretending and are putting on a mask, and all these people who are just going there to kind of chuck off a religious time card, and these people who are buying and selling stuff, and it's just all this artificial man-made worship stuff. And he goes in and he gets angry. And he goes in and it's like, oh my goodness, everyone's watching as he grabs the first edge of the table and he just flips it over. Wow. And everyone's like, what just happened? And then he goes over to another one. He grabs it from the end and he just, what? What is going on? And people are crazed, and there's chaos happening, and they all are kind of deserting, and they're running out, and people are so confused. They're so confused with what is happening in this moment as they're all watching Jesus in this moment. And finally, they're just waiting for him to speak. And he kind of looks at the crowd that's listening, and he says to them in Matthew 21:13, he said, the scriptures declare, my temple will be called a house of prayer. But you have turned it into a den of thieves. You have turned this place into something that it was not meant to be. And everyone is scratching their heads over this moment. And then as people are kind of deserting the space, as they're running away, everyone is still very much, imagine this is a huge moment. Everyone is paying attention. There are tons and tons and tons of people there. And then, to everyone's complete surprise, even for yourself as this child, hearing all these stories of what one day might happen, in verse 14 it says that the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. The leading priests, the teachers of the religious law, saw these wonderful miracles and heard even the children in the temple shouting, praise God for the Son of David. But the leaders were indignant. The leaders were angry. The leaders were frustrated. But even in this moment, it goes beyond them. Because in this moment, everyone is caught in complete awe and shock. Because there are those who come into the temple, those who are deeply hurting, those who have physical ailments, and God in this moment heals them. Jesus heals them. But then on the other side, there are those who are in charge, who are getting angry, and they're like, what is this guy doing? But then in between, there's this massive group of people who are neither this nor this. They're pretty ordinary folk. Maybe they're on hard times. Maybe they're very prosperous in their careers, whatever it may be. But they're not those in charge. They're not those with physical ailments. But yet they understand the Old Testament promises, but they're still scratching their heads because this is not what we thought would happen. And what's truly crazy to see what happens next is that we see as the week progresses and we go towards this whole season of Holy Week, we see that later on, Jesus gets betrayed. He gets falsely accused. They make up all these lies about crimes that he's committed, and they arrest him, and he gets put on trial before all these people, and Pilate too, and even Pilate himself is saying, listen, would you rather have Barabbas, this horrible, evil man, this Jeffrey Dahmer type guy, this guy who's murdered so many people, would you rather have him or would you rather have Jesus set free? And everyone is screaming, let this guy go. Are you sure? I mean, the crowd flips so fast on Jesus. From loving him in this moment, crying out Hosanna, to now wanting this guy set free instead of him. And what happens in the mindset of people, this is one of the most turning of events in the New Testament, because what is happening in this moment is because people are seeing Jesus come into their city. They're saying, finally our king is coming, and they're going to punch our oppressors in the teeth, and they're going to take care of our problems. He's going to finally take out the real enemy. But instead he comes into the temple and he comes after us? I mean, don't you know what team you're on, big guy? Don't you have this all confused? And this is a crazy moment as the people are looking at Jesus and they're saying, you're not him anymore. Because if you were, you knew who the real enemy was. They find themselves in this moment of tremendous confusion, this tremendous doubt of who Jesus actually is. They no longer think that he is the one they've been looking for because he has not lived up to what they thought he would do. And so they completely turn against him. And you see, there's something stirring up in our world today of many, many, many people, some raised in church, some who've been a part of the Christian faith for a long time, who are now not liking the taste and spitting it out because it seems like the God who they had trusted in or they were told about is now seeming not to measure up to who they thought he would be. It seems like people today now are seeking after God, and it seems like some are asking for him to speak, but he's awfully silent. Or they're asking him to move and do something, but still it seems like prayers are going unanswered. Or we're hoping for something to come about, some sort of help or some sort of generous thing or something to come together, and it seems like nothing is happening. I remember once I was sitting across from the table from a gentleman who was much older than I was at the time, and to my complete shock and my complete heartache, we were talking just through our life and all these things, and I was completely shocked when I heard him tell the story of his life, and he shared about how for many years he had loved God, and many years grew up in church, and he married a great young Christian woman, and they had children, had a family, and he even had a call to ministry, and he was in school to be a pastor, all these things, and he had just gotten into ministry, all these things. And it came about where his wife had left him for another man, and through some really terrible situations, the children all went with her too, and he was completely caught away, and just things began to fall apart. And so as we were sitting across the table, he shared with me, he said, Andre, listen, where was God in all of that? You see, I've walked away from my faith. I've left behind all that stuff because where was God in all those things when life was just crumbling to pieces? And this is a real reality of our experience in life. A very real reality of our experience of faith is we're trying to be people who cling to Jesus, but yet also too are running through situations and seasons that are tough. And it's like we try to put our faith to reality, and it seems like it's not quite measuring up to what we hoped it would be, and things aren't quite coming together. And it's like the struggles are there, the hardship is there, nothing is changing. And you see, the reality is, friends, is at this moment of the humanity of people recognizing and seeing that their entire expectation list of who they thought Jesus was are all not measuring up, and they're becoming a people who are turning away from God. So are we in so many moments. So many people today have all these ideas of who God is, and that's what they cling to. And what happens when they try to reach out and grab a hold of those for help, they completely fall apart. And so many people walk away from church, and many people walk away from God. And I wonder if we could perhaps make this shift in how we embrace faith and how we experience relationship with God. If we could make this change and we really understand, we really grab a hold of what it means to walk with God and what it means to have a very true and honest grasp of who He is. Because can He really be someone that we trust in if it seems like there are a lot of moments where it feels like He's not coming through? You see, what's fascinating is that in this same exact day, there are 3 events that take place. We've already read the second 2, the moment of Him coming into the city and the moment of Him then going into the temple, and after the temple moment, he goes on off to bed. He probably goes to sleep a little early, like some of us right now. He's one of those guys. And you see, something happens much earlier that morning that is actually just as significant as the triumphal entry. And it happens on Palm Sunday, but yet it doesn't get quite tossed into the whole story of Palm Sunday. You see, before this, as Jesus wakes up that first morning, that early morning, he and his disciples get up that morning, and they're off in the city of Jericho, which is and it's the same Jericho that we've all heard the stories of in the Old Testament. It's a few hours walk out about northeast side of Jerusalem. And they're staying in there that evening. And so that morning they wake up and they're making their way into the city. And there comes this moment where people again start to crowd around Jesus. They know what day it is. They know that it's Passover week. And they have these ideas of Jesus being the Messiah, that He is the Christ. And so they recognize that these things are all kind of lining up together. So people are following, right? He's just got these people who are tracking Him behind Him, right? Who are just watching. Just these stalker type people, right? Who are just watching to see what He does next. And you see, as He's making His way from Jericho down to Jerusalem, there's this very special moment that gets missed. There's this moment that happens in verse 29 as Jesus and His disciples left the town of Jericho. A large crowd followed behind, and 2 blind men were sitting beside the road. And when they heard that Jesus was coming that way, they began shouting, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." And "Be quiet," the crowd yelled at them. But they shouted louder, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." And when Jesus heard them, He stopped and called them. "What do you want me to do for you?" "Lord," they said, "we want to see." And Jesus felt sorry for them and touched their eyes, and instantly they could see. And then they followed Him. And in the very next verse, we read about the triumphal entry. Understand that this is a special moment as Jesus is making His way, as we're beginning Holy Week and looking to the cross. Because at the very beginning of Jesus' ministry, there's this special Isaiah 61 moment where Jesus is in the temple, and he references an Old Testament promise of who the Messiah would be. He says this in Luke 4. He says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for He has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim that the captives will be released, and that the blind will see, and that the oppressed will be set free, and that the time of the Lord's favor has come." And this is a moment that is building up anticipation for what Jesus has always been up to. And He's trying to make it so crystal clear to humanity that they've been seeing all of this wrong, and they've heard these promises of the captives being set free. They've heard these promises of those in bondage brought to freedom. All these things that the blind will see, and these things are happening. But in this moment, as he comes alongside and He heals these 2 men, it's a significant, eye-opening moment in a very literal way, in a very figured way, as God is trying to usher in this sense of what He is up to, because they've been completely wrong this entire time. But they're the ones who are in bondage. Not just those who are behind bars. That humanity are captivated and captives to sin. And they can't escape and they can't get out of it. And as Jesus in this moment is trying to help people understand, as the enemy is not Herod, It's not Caesar, it's not the Romans, it's not any of this other stuff. It is what is inside of them that needs to be taken care of. And this is a very significant moment, but yet still in all of the chaos and all of the confusion and all of the expectations that are so off base, Jesus still has this very real moment of coming to two people. Oh, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? In this moment, more than the triumphal entry, more than his time in the temple, we see two things. We see the heart of the rescuer. Not just the mission that they thought he had, but we see the real mission and we see the heart of God. Because he's coming into this moment as crowds are all trying to get his attention, as people are trying to flag him down. These men who have been kicked to the curb, these men who are pushed aside, who are just wanting Jesus. Got him. And this is a special moment that reveals the heart of God because right before this, there's this quite uncomfortable moment because James and John, two disciples of Jesus, their mom comes to try to take care of them and tries to kind of help their status. And sometimes we know when mom's intentions are good, but sometimes like, Mom, come on, we could do this, right? I'm a grown man now, right? And some of that stuff. And so mom comes in and mom says, Jesus, would it be okay if my sons, you know, the really good ones who do all the things that you ask? Yeah. Your star pupils? Yeah, those are my kids. You're welcome. Would you mind if they could sit on your right and your left? I could only imagine Jesus. Lady, you have no idea what you're asking. Because you don't understand what is about to happen. It says because the position and what I'm about is so totally different than you trying to get status, than you trying to have an elevated quality of life. So much more. It is actually this truth that the Son of Man came to serve, not be served, and he came to give his life as a ransom for many. And that is actually the phrase that Jesus shares right before the two men who are blind are healed. And we've got to understand in these moments where our faith is struggling, we've got to recognize that the heart of God is joining us in those moments of struggle. I remember being a kid, we lived out in the country for a period of my childhood, and my brothers and I, we were wild kids, and I remember when we got dial-up internet, right? That screeching sound just to get on and check your AOL email. And so I remember we were kids, so we'd often go outside, and we didn't have all these cool stuff. So we went outside, we played, and we beat each other with sticks because we were boys and we were crazy. And we'd go out, and we'd run through the woods, we'd run through the fields, and especially kind of in the early summer, you know, as the tall grass would get even taller and the birds would come out, right? Not birds flying in the air, the birds from all the prickers and whatnot. And we'd run through, we'd play, we'd come back to the house. And before we'd come into the house, my mom would always stop us. Stop! And we'd stand there covered in all these prickers and burrs and all this stuff. And we didn't care, right? They hurt. But my mom would come and she would kind of kneel down inside. She wouldn't let us get in the house with all this stuff on us. But she would say, hey, you want, pluck it all off. And she would even come and she'd kneel down next to us. And she would even take care of some of the bigger ones. She'd take care of the big ones that would really hurt your fingers when you touch them. And I have to imagine Jesus just wants humanity to realize is that the world is very, very broken. And he has come to redeem it. And he has come. And we'll talk about that through this series. That the life that we have right here in this world is not all of it. There's so much more. We're going to talk through a lot this whole month as we lean into the struggles of our faith, the doubts of our faith, and understand that this world that we live in is only temporary. And that there is a world way beyond this. And there's a day that Jesus will return and he'll make all things new. but understand that we live in a very broken world. And so walking through what we experience in life, the things that happen to us, even sometimes the bad decisions that we make, they get stuck to us, but Jesus likes to come along and he likes to take care of some of the big ones and pluck them off of us and help clean us off. And he likes to have that heart that cares, that is gracious and patient and compassionate, who likes to be present in those seasons of great struggles, be present in those moments where there are a million other things that he could do, but he wants to be present with you. We understand in this precious day the heart of our rescuer, but what is so important for us to recognize is that we've got to have a heart of those being rescued. Because understand, these two men who were blind experienced the help and the aid of Christ. Because they were not overwhelmed with trying to make themselves look good. They were not caught up in trying to make sure their status was appealing to people. They were not caught up in any of the stuff of the world. They just wanted Jesus. They didn't mind looking desperate. They didn't mind looking hopeless or helpless. I love how in this moment it says that Jesus felt sorry for them. Wow. I wonder perhaps if there's too much pride radiating inside of us where God himself can't even feel sorry for us because we are so stuck in where we like to be. We're so stuck in our own way, and we're so stuck in being right, and we're so stuck in earning it, and so stuck in all of our humanness and trying to pull ourselves up from our own bootstraps and trying to be self-reliant and all of these things. I wonder if God himself at some points is no longer feeling sorry. Because our own heart is so narcissistic and so about us. And in this moment, these people are just saying, God, have mercy on us. Have mercy. Understand that mercy is way different than grace. Grace is the giving of what we don't deserve. Mercy is the withholding of what we do deserve. It is mercy that is given in a court system where the judge decides to lower or pass off the sentence to a person who has very much earned that sentence or earned that judgment, but they have mercy on them, instead change it in some way that is less. That is mercy. And in this moment, they're crying out, not for grace, but God, have mercy on us. We recognize the mess that we are. We recognize the brokenness that we are. We recognize the flesh that I give into often. The things that I do that I'm not proud of. But Lord, please have mercy on us. You see, Jesus wants to come along and he wants to be a friend, but he can only be that way towards us if we are willing to exalt him as king. If we turn him into some kind of genie that we just come to sprinkle some blessing on our life, but we keep on doing life our way. That's not how God works. But if we're willing to lift him up as king, and it says that when they were healed, they followed. Could you imagine that moment? They didn't say, oh, finally I can go do what I want. Finally I can go pursue the career I've always wanted. Finally I can go do my life my way. I can marry that dream girl. I can get that cool car. I can finally do all the things I want. No, they followed him. They just want to be more with him. How much of the time do we chase after God? He starts to piece things back together in our life. And we're like, all right, God, I got it from here. And we kind of go off on our own again. And we wonder why when we go off-road on our own, the road starts to get bumpy again. And we got, all right, I got to come back into church. People go through these cycles every 3, 6, 12 months where life gets hard, so they get back close to God, but life gets good, so they're like, okay, we got this. We get right back into where we were going, and then life gets hard again, and they go back into it. People follow these cycles of life. And man, what if we just stayed? And what if we just followed and said, Lord, I need more of your mercy. I need more of your help. I want to lift you as king in my life. I know that you want to be friend, but my heart My heart wants to use this friendship to better me. I want to use this friendship that you're giving me as a one-way street just to make me happy, to fix my problems. And I'll keep on going back the way that I wanted to go. What if we embrace this world and this way of living? We're in seasons of immense struggle. Seasons where we can barely wake up the next day. Seasons where we don't want to get out of bed. Seasons where we just want to call it quits. Because it seems like these kids aren't growing up and maturing fast enough. It seems like stuff in the job is not happening. It feels like my marriage is not getting better. It feels like nothing is. What if in those seasons we just came so close to Jesus and said, God, I really need you to be near to me. And have mercy on me. I don't want your friendship in my life just to please me so I can go back to my own ways. No, I want you to please come in, and I just want to be closer to you than I've ever been closer to you than before. Because sometimes I get confused with what you're trying to do in my life, and I make it about me, and I'm sorry. Have mercy on me. Have mercy on me, God. What if we made these shifts in our life and God really began to bring about this new sense of belonging to Christ? Remember years ago I was having coffee with this young man who grew up in his church, and he was in a season of really struggling with depression and anxiety, and he was about to head off to college, and he was terrified for college and just all this stuff. And we were having coffee, talking through all these things, and he had known church. He had known about God. He knew the VeggieTales stories with the blueberry Slurpees that are there at the city of Jericho. He knew all the stories. He knew all of them. But as we're sitting there having coffee, he felt so overwhelmed by life. And I just asked him, where is God in your soul? Because sometimes in this world we get this idea that the cross, and I don't mean to diminish, sometimes we think it's just about being saved by sin and being brought from sin to salvation. And that is true, but that is not the whole story. I remember sitting in that conversation and saying, do you feel like Christ has been leading you from the state of brokenness that you are in or once in towards freedom? Towards freedom. I mean, imagine waking up and not having that anxiety. Imagine waking up and those insecurities that are bothering you in every moment. Imagine those. Imagine stepping out into the world and knowing that the presence of God is with you. And imagine those stories you hear of other people of encountering God in their life. Imagine if that was you. And not in this back in 1983 kind of way, but in a today kind of way. Like in an each and every moment kind of way. In that moment we discussed what it looks like to be people not who just make a decision and say, yeah, I believe that God is real, but to be people who really live in relationship with Jesus and live out a pure, authentic, genuine love and hunger for God. Doesn't mean that life is instantly fixed. Doesn't mean that things that you hope for won't fall apart or won't always come together. Oftentimes, we pray for God to change or help other people, but we forget that they have free will too. And so sometimes we put a lot of our faith in people when it really should be in God. But what if we began to shift and really experience a relationship with God that trusted in Him and clung to Him? In this next couple of weeks, we're going to look at all these things that we kind of tack on the whiteboard of what we expect God to do. And we often get it so wrong. Because He is up to something totally different in the world. And if we realign ourselves in a special way, I really believe we'll encounter Him in a way that is so fresh and real and meaningful. A way that is not just what we were told about as kids, but a way that is in our own self, a way of encountering God for the first time in each and every day. Because even as a young man, I've been walking with Jesus for a little over the last decade. It is those weeks and those days where maybe I get caught in my own way or get caught in my own stuff. Or my heart starts to hurt a lot. You know what I'm talking about? When life gets heavy, when things get hard, you start to lose hope. But it's those days where I spend a close amount of time with God. The days that I can press on. And so what if we had those types of days together? I don't know where you are. I don't know what crisis you're going through. I don't know what things you're worried about that you're lifting to God. If it's about your adult children, or about the ones that are just born, if it's about job stuff or life stuff or marriage stuff or other stuff, listen, I encourage you. Jesus wants to be a part of it. He wants to be a part of it.